We just defeated Giovanni. Now it's time to recover and have a chat. With me today, I have Professor Gerardo.
Greetings. Welcome to the Pokemon world.
And Gym Leader Teresa.
I hope you're ready for a challenge.
And I am Hunter, and I am also here. So we wanted to talk about the Let's Go series and or maybe series. They've only done like the 2 games. And maybe continuing it on with Pokemon Gold and Silver remakes, because that's kind of what Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee was. If you really break it down, it was basically just Kanto remakes again, because they already did like Fire Red and Leaf Green, you know? So when you break it down, we've done remakes for all of the games that are a few years old ever since Red and Blue, right? So we got Fire Red and Leaf Green. And then in the DS era, we got Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and then it's just kind of continued from there. But then they did something interesting when the Switch came out, is that they were starting to do the next generation. So like 2 generations prior, rather, remakes with Pikachu and Eevee, with redoing Gen 1. Which, if we're following that same pattern and we just got Diamond and Pearl remakes, in theory, we should be getting Gen 2 remakes in the form of a Let's Go soon, right? Does the math there make sense?
Yeah, that sounds like the pattern that they've been going for.
Because otherwise, how would they like continue on, you know?
Yeah, my thing with Let's Go, Johto, when it comes to this, it's almost time for them to bring something up about it. Like, I think back when they did the Pokemon Presents, they should have probably done a little bit of an announcement for Let's Go, if that was still something that they were thinking of doing. Because I think personally, Let's Go is coming from the side of Pokemon fandom that was recently remade into a thing with Pokemon Go. The whole main mechanic of just catching Pokemon was, brought over from Pokemon Go. But I feel that these days, Pokemon Go isn't as prominent as it was 5 years ago. I see, honestly, Pokemon Go maybe has at least another, I would say, 3 to 4 years to keep going as like an app itself. Because a lot of, it's not for this show specifically, I think, but like a lot of Pokemon Go is right now is experiencing a lot of customer fallout, I suppose you could call it that.
I strongly disagree, and that's actually a massive part of my argument for why they will do a Let's Go.
Okay.
And I'll get into some of the specifics later.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, just a quick observation. Personally, I haven't noticed anybody playing Pokemon Go in the wild in literally years.
Interesting.
So it feels dead to me, but that's without doing any research into how big the player base actually is, because I stopped playing it like a good 4 years ago, probably.
So in the city that I live in, and in an adjacent city, the Valley, there are really, really big communities, Facebook groups that kind of turned into Discord groups that are constantly, like, there's bots and everything, and people are always like trying to stay up to date. Every weekend, there's actually a group of people that go out to do some raids. They'll go from gym to gym, and people are always updating. There's a raid over 20 minutes away over here that's going on, and people are just literally, the coordination is insane. There's people scattered all across the city in front of like different areas that have a lot of gyms. They're just circling around, seeing if a new raid is going to happen for a legendary or something, posting in the Discord, and then group kind of leaders deciding, okay, we're going to go do this one, or the people that want to do Articuno instead of Zapdos are going to go, you guys can go to this way, but then we're going to go this way. It's like the groups of like 30, 40, sometimes like 50 people every weekend doing this. Like, it's massive. And that's just in my city. In adjacent cities, because I'm a part of the this other one as well in an adjacent city, and they're probably even larger, honestly. I see some of the groups in there that get like 100 people going to these raids every weekend. So while I agree that I think that the casual audience, like with everyone playing all the time, like when it first came out, isn't as big. The dedicated audience is really, really dedicated and probably bigger than you're thinking. It's like,
And I'm thinking pretty small.
you're probably thinking like 4 or 5 people, right? Like, no, it's like 50 people go into these things. Like I've gone sometimes because I'm like, oh yeah, sure. Like I want a Latios. I haven't done a Latios raid, and it would be nice to get a shiny. And then I go, there's like 50 people there at this like baseball court that you have to like kind of walk pretty far away from your car to get to. And then they're like, all right, we're going to the mall for this one. And then everyone just goes and meets up. And they'll do like multiple, like one after the other and stuff, and separate into teams. Like Team Valor, you guys hop into this group because to get like the team bonuses and stuff. Like it's very coordinated, and there's a lot of people.
I guess I just haven't seen anything like that since, the early days, and it would be pretty uncommon to just see something like that at the place that I play Pokemon Go. I won't say.
Sure.
So it's I don't know. It has, I guess, specifically in other parts of the world too, like Japan, for example. I have a couple of people on my Pokemon Go friends list from Japan, and they're constantly inviting me to raids. And it's like, well, I guess Pokemon Go in Japan is still kind of like a thing, When I joined these raids, like it there's lots of people in the lobby, and it's like, you come here, you get maybe 3 people in the lobby, depending on where you are.
So that's true probably so it probably is bigger in Japan. I don't know what the scene is like that over there, but I think there's probably a larger in-person community for Pokemon Go where we are, in like the LA area at least, because from what I see, everyone's on Discord and communicating over Discord. It's not like friends inviting friends to stuff. I'm sure everybody is friends, but it's mainly like everyone is communicating over Discord, and if you're in the Discord and you're interested in raiding that weekend, like everybody goes. There's at least a consistent like 30 people or so. They're like always there, but it often, there's a lot of people that cycle through that ends up bringing it to like 50 or so. Like I've never seen fewer than like 30 people at one of those. Like it's still always going on. And I think a big part of it is the reason why it's perceived as not as big is because it's not as big of a media thing anymore. So you don't see the media talk about it. Like you don't see Hillary Clinton saying to let's go to the polls and all of that, like that kind of corny stuff, because it's not news anymore. It's not new anymore. So it's not in the news. But the Pokemon Go community itself, the fan base itself, is still very, very massive. And I'm just looking through the annual revenue generated by Pokemon Go. The first year that it came out, it made $550 million. Which is pretty good, especially when you consider that it came out in the summer, right? So that's halfway through the year. And then the second year was actually the worst year for it at 400 million. But even still, that's $500 million. And every single year it makes at least $500 million. 2020, ironically, that was during the pandemic. It made almost $1 billion. It made 900 million. The year after that, it made 874 million, almost another $1 billion. And then this last year, it made 600 million. So like it's constantly doing $500 million, like more than $500 million. It's made over $4 billion so far. And so for that reason, I don't see them shutting that down like a lot of other Nintendo apps that only had like about 2 years, like the Mario Kart app or the Dr. Mario app. I see them milking Pokemon Go for as long as possible. I mean, they just did the tie-in with Scarlet and Violet, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the Gimme Ghouls. So I see Pokemon Go kind of being a through line, like a consistent game across the entire Pokemon franchise, which is constantly doing new generations of game every couple of years.
I guess that's a good argument. I, for sure, don't want to see the downfall of Pokemon Go. I've made really good memories with Pokemon Go. Replaying Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee was probably the worst experience I've had with Pokemon in years. And so I'm just really hesitant to go forward with that if it's going to be, more or less the same thing, but just in Johto,
I can see what you mean, but I think that Johto hasn't gotten as much love compared to a lot of other games, which is weird. I feel like for a lot of older Pokemon fans, Johto is their favorite region, but for some reason it just doesn't get as much love as a lot of the other regions.
For sure, yeah.
And so to see Johto for the first time in 3D, like to have like 3D models of like the towers and everything, I would like to see that. I want to see it like done very beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
But I can understand how that would kind of sour the experience a little bit, or sour your memories maybe, because Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee was kind of a subpar game in a lot of aspects.
I mean, it had great music. That's what I'm always gonna say about Pokemon games, is that the reorchestration of Kanto in Let's Go was very well done. And I think it would be even better with Johto, because Johto has a lot of beautiful melodies. Only thing is, that can't be the only thing that the game has,
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like it's time for a little bit beyond what Let's Go did, because all Let's Go really did was, like, it was kind of a new story, but not really. Like, if you think about Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, it's like its own type of universe in a sense, because like Red, Blue, and Green were there in the game.
Yeah.
And it's like they're trying to establish something new, So maybe even the Let's Go, timeline, multiverse, whatever you want to call it, is on its own thing. So I would actually be more interested to see where they take that timeline,
Yeah, kind of the continuation of that. I think ever since Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon is when they started really pushing the alternate timeline angle, which Pokemon has always kind of hinted at, but Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon was the first one where they like really, really pushed the idea, like, hey, some of these games take place in other timelines completely and have completely different stories. So to see Let's Go come out and the story is pretty different from the original is kind of interesting. So like you mentioned, like to see Leaf for the first time and seeing her there, like that's super interesting. Like why she shouldn't be here. I'm playing as the male character. Why is that? How can she be there? Why is she throwing a Pokeball at me? Why does she think that I'm a Pokemon?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I a monster you can fit in your pocket? But like it hints at a lot of past that you're kind of missing, a lot of story that you're not getting the full picture of.
Yeah, and it's even like it rewrote the canon in a sense, because Red and Blue weren't the ones to stop Giovanni. You were in this game.
Yeah, exactly. So I think a part of that is to respect the series history, but with like you not playing as Red and Blue, but then also keeping them as these kind of like legendary mythical figures, still kind of similar to how they handled it in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, actually. But then also you can have like the silly main character that you can just kind of mess around with and have these kind of fun stories with like Leaf throwing a Pokeball at you and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But like on the other hand, yeah, that does completely rewrite the canon a little bit, because this is a completely different world, different timeline.
And yeah, I think that's probably the most exciting thing about the Let's Go series, if they, continue it.
Yeah, and then to think about, okay, well then how would they handle that in Gold and Silver? Like a Let's Go Gold, Let's Go Silver. I don't know what they would call
They would
them,
even have two different sets of characters to pull from, on top of maybe designing a new one, They probably will. They have, the original Gold, and then the rival Silver, and then the player character from Crystal, Chris. The story would probably be the same like it was, in Gold and Silver, except perhaps maybe there'll be a bit more, I don't know, just diving into the ancient historical past of Johto, and perhaps getting a bit more along the lines of a Heart Gold Soul Silver treatment, where, Heart Gold Soul Silver was more so a remake of Crystal, not necessarily Gold and Silver.
Right. What you're saying kind of already follows what they did with Pikachu and Eevee, because they retold the story kind of in a way, like from scratch, even though you're playing as different characters. And so I still see Gold and Silver, Let's Go Gold and Silver, whatever they're going to end up calling it, following the same pattern. Kind of, you're going through the story linearly, and maybe Silver is still the one that you run into that steals stuff from you, or maybe it's a new character, but then I still see them doing most likely probably a new character. And then you kind of going through the same series of events, which would still be kind of interesting because at the end of the game, the secret final boss, if you will, of that game was Red at the top of at the top of the mountain. So to see Red appear again, but like the Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee version of Red could be really interesting. That could be really fun.
It would just be the protagonist.
Or the protagonist. Yeah, that'd be interesting too.
It could be you. It could pull from your save data.
That'd be cool. That'd be wicked. But then you didn't finish the game. You just have like a level 5 Charmander.
Yeah, it might be like the team that you registered in the Hall of Fame with the first time or whatever.
Probably, yeah. But then it probably wouldn't be as leveled up, as difficult, you know? Well, they could always level it up. I don't know.
Yeah, they can always scale it, you know. They can work magic. We got this.
Or what if it's gold? There's a lot that they could do, actually, regarding the story. And kind of seeing how they could twist the story in the future.
My main question is, what Pokemon do you think they would get to represent these games like Pikachu and Eevee? Because I was trying super hard to think of something, and there's just nothing similar to Pikachu and Eevee for Johto, at least. And the only thing I could think of was, you know, the biggest thing in Johto at the time was eggs. That was like the new hotness. So
egg Pokemon.
They could give us even worse Pokemon. Let's go Elekid and Magby.
So I think it's possible. Man, that would suck. So I think what they would probably do is drop the cute like Pokemon part of it and just go with the legendaries, Ho-Oh and Lugia, because the reason why you can't do that for Gen 1 is because there's no version exclusive legendaries. Gold and Silver were the first games to do that. And ever since Gold and Silver, then we always have basically 2 legendaries for every game, and then a secret third legendary usually. So
yeah,
you can't do that with Mew and Mewtwo, you know, like Let's Go Mew and Let's Go Mewtwo. Like, are you gonna Mewtwo sounds like the sequel or something? Like, that's not quite the same thing, you know?
Yeah, I get that. That would be interesting. I mean, they're no stranger to giving us like legendary Pokemon as partners these days, especially with Scarlet and Violet, you know?
Yeah, right off the bat.
Yeah. Maybe even not like giving us that Pokemon per se. Maybe they'll do something along the lines of like a ride Pokemon.
Yeah, the ride Pokemon thing is kind of what I was thinking, because it'd be like Latios and Latias and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire.
That's what I was thinking. And Ho-Oh and Lugia are flying Pokemon.
Yeah.
So it could be a very similar thing. What if the like companion Pokemon? I don't know. I have an idea of how they could handle the companion Pokemon, the official companion, if that makes sense. Because when you got Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, there was the option to get it with the Pokeball. What's it called? The Pokeball Plus, the accessory. And if you do that, it comes with a Mew inside. And you can bring that Mew into the game, and the Mew can follow you around on top of your Pokemon that already follows you around, that you choose to follow you around. So you can have like 2 Pokemon following you around, basically, with Mew. And I could see them doing something similar with Celebi.
Yeah, they can even make the Pokeball Plus extension, you know, the accessory that came with it could be the GS Ball.
So, but I was thinking that if they just give you Celebi right off the bat, because I don't think that they're going to make people buy a Pokeball Plus from scratch again just to get the Celebi inside. But they could do that, but my gosh. I'm thinking that they could probably do that earlier in the game to not lock, because I just hate the idea of them locking content behind these limited time real world events. But I mean, they could do that. I could also see them doing that because they have a track record of doing that. But I see them, because they're being so generous with legendaries, and I guess they're not legendaries anymore. Celebi's a mythical Pokemon. With the mythical Pokemon, I see them kind of just giving Celebi to us, and Celebi could be like the voice in your ear, kind of. Like, especially with being a time traveling Pokemon, kind of hinting at some of the past of the world or something. Yeah. And that could be the free companion that you have with you throughout the game, kind of.
You guys are making me want this game. You're giving me glimmers of hope.
One thing to keep in mind about doing a Let's Go Gold and Silver, though, is that, like, in Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu, I think one of the biggest problems the games had is the no wild battles thing. I feel like that detracted from the experience, personally.
100% agree.
Yeah. That's so interesting, because that's the opposite of what a lot of Pokemon players feel. Pokemon fans feel.
I disagree.
Interesting. I am kind of in both camps, actually. I remember when the new games were coming out, there was a lot of buzz over, are they going to keep random encounters, or are they going to do it like they did in Let's Go? And everyone was like, please just do it like they did in Let's Go.
I think the grind is integral to the Pokemon training experience. But anyways, so I definitely feel like that's something that they should amend if they did a Gold and Silver Let's Go remake and just bring back the wild battles. And then they can have their motion control capture after. Like when you want to throw a Pokeball at the wild Pokemon. I could totally... I think they have only removed an aspect of the wild battle mechanic there. I think they could still have the rest of the game on top of that.
So that's one thing, because Let's Go was kind of an experimental game that came out. They came out pretty early in the Switch's life cycle, so it was a bit more gimmicky. I feel like a lot of games at that time were trying to be a bit more gimmicky, trying to use the features of the Switch, like the unique features of the Switch, in some kind of creative way. But I ended up just hating it in Let's Go, at least. So I don't know entirely, because now things are a little bit less gimmicky. Would they keep that? Would they keep the janky Pokeball throwing thing?
For the love of Arceus, please do not.
Now, I understand where you're coming from. I am biased towards motion controls. I don't think that it adds a whole lot to the experience in this case. I'm pretty, I'd be indifferent whether or not they actually include that. I'm just assuming that they would want to include that so that it plays more like Pokemon Go. Because that's kind of like, that's what they were working off of with this game. It was like a full Pokemon experience, but kind of like Pokemon Go. Because I think it was very marketed towards the casual players, and Pokemon Go had just come out, and there was the exclusive Pokemon Go Pokemon Meltan and Melmetal that you could transfer into this game. So I'm working off the assumption that they would just want to keep doing that. I forget, in handheld, did you throw Pokeballs with a control stick or with a touch screen?
You just press A.
Oh, you just press A?
If you press A, it throws the ball right in the middle of that little circle that appears, so it's like perfect every single time. And they did that because the Switch Lite was coming out, and obviously for the most part all Nintendo Switches are going to have Joy-Cons, right? But there was the possibility that a kid was going to play this game. Obviously it's a Pokemon game, probably not going to have Joy-Cons that they can sync to their Switch Lites, so they had to enable just pressing A as an option. It was kind of weird, now that I think about it, that Pikachu and Eevee kind of locked that behind being able to play docked.
Yeah.
So regardless of the major flaws that Let's Go Eevee and Let's Go Pikachu has, I do think that there is like a major positive there that the other Switch Pokemon games, I don't believe that they have. Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee does a great job at making the Pokemon world feel more alive. And that's not necessarily a gameplay thing. It's just core to the aesthetic experience that the game provides. One of the most major things is your players' interactions with the partner Pokemon that they chose, Pikachu or Eevee. The game had a lot of really cute cutscenes of like interactions between the player and your partner Pokemon, Pikachu or Eevee. Some of them from like a first-person perspective. They were really trying to drive home the fact that this is your friend, your Pokemon.
Your partner.
Your partner, yes. And I actually really liked that. It just from what it adds to the experience of the game.
Yeah. I feel like it made me feel like I was part of something.
Yeah.
Like there was somebody else along with me, and it kind of, it felt like an anime type of moment. Like that would exactly what something like that would happen in the anime.
Yeah. And on top of that, your Pikachu and Eevee could ride on your shoulder or on your head in the overworld where you're moving around. And on top of that, you could also have any other member of your Pokemon party walking with you in the overworld, or you can ride on some of them like Onyx. And I thought that was really cool. That's something that you don't see in most of the mainline Pokemon games, except for like Heart Gold and Soul Silver, where all the Pokemon can follow you, which I thought was really cool.
I think that, combined with seeing a lot of Pokemon in the overworld, both in towns and through the routes, makes it feel more like you're in a Pokemon world rather than playing through a Pokemon game, if that makes sense. Like, the world is there regardless of you. You see the Pokemon running around. you're in a town and you see like a Pidgeotto flying above your head or something, it feels alive. Like you're in this living world that's just kind of happening around you. And I think that that's really important for one, young kids, but also two, for a generation of Pokemon games that has a lot of history to it. A lot of like people almost treat Gen 1 and Gen 2 as like these holy games, these like near perfect experiences, which, I partially disagree with. But I think that like the legacy of Pokemon, like kind of them trying to respect that legacy of it with like you not playing as Red and stuff like we talked about before. You're living through a world that previous generations of people hold in a really high regard. So it feels like you're living in that world rather than carving your own path, because that path has been carved, Does that make sense? Am I making any sense there? It makes it feel more magical in a way.
I feel like I kind of get what you're saying there. Like you're saying all of the Pokemon that we have today, the franchise is, it originates with the first two gens for the most part.
Mm-hmm. A lot of the series history
began with Gen 2.
Yeah, one with Gen 1 because that was like the very first games, but a lot of what we consider regular parts of the Pokemon experience actually started with Gen 2. I think that the Gen 2 added a lot to Pokemon that is still carried on till today.
For sure.
One thing that I do feel is important for people that have played Gen 2 before, like I've played Pokemon Gold and I played Heart Gold. I've already played through that generation so many times, both as a kid and as an adult, or as a young adult at least, is I want it to be, I guess I want to go through it a little bit faster. Like I kind of think of myself already as like the master of that world. So why make me play through like a 40-hour experience, and kind of struggle from scratch, if that makes sense? To kind of let me catch up a little bit, give me fast movement speed like they did in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Actually, the battles were a little bit easier too, like I was able to get through the game a lot faster. They kind of leveled you up. They kind of made it a lot easier in a lot of ways. And if I'm going to be playing through the game again, I'd rather just be able to get through it a lot quicker,
I get what you're saying,
but
I don't think that's gonna happen. I want there to be more interactivity and make it feel like an old Pokemon game. The recent removal of like in Scarlet and Violet, it wasn't a complete removal, but like trainer battles were optional. If it wants to emulate Gen 2 in a better way, you keep everything the way it was. Non-optional trainer battles, and I guess you can keep the overworld spawns. Those are fine.
I don't think that they want it to be very faithful to Gen 2 because Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee wasn't. It was a different take on Gen 1.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that why not go all the way with it instead of that half measure? I guess Pikachu and Eevee, howlongtobeat.com says that it was 25-ish hours, which I guess feels about right for Gen 1. But I kind of feel like they could have gone a little bit more with it and make it feel like I can get through it a lot faster, if that makes sense. Especially since I think it is for younger kids, like probably even younger than like 10, which is the target audience of the original games. It's a little bit more gimmicky. It's a little bit easier in some ways. So if it's already for a younger audience and I'm already someone who's gone through the game, then make it easier for both of us.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm not saying it needs to be, brought down to old speed, because there's a lot of quality of life that could be done to make it more bearable,
Mm-hmm.
I get your also your notion of I'm the master, why do I gotta do this again, there would be a good and bad way to go about it, and I feel like if the experience is a little bit too easy, then it's not gonna be as a lengthy experience. I don't know. I kind of feel like I want a lengthy experience with the Johto region, When I think lengthy, I also think, are they gonna keep Kanto in there?
Oh, interesting.
I just thought about that right now.
Well, they already kind of have the skeletons for it, right? Because they already did Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee.
Mm-hmm.
So the other route that I could see them doing, because again, I feel like they should either not do the half measure, just let it be a very easy, very fast experience. Let us get through the world really quickly, or have that flying type mechanic they did in Oros. With like Ho-Oh and Lugia maybe being able to fly around the region, that would make me feel a little bit more like I've already done this before. That's my region. I've conquered this land. But the other route that they could go is just to lean way more into the story side of things, which it sounds like our conversation from earlier that we're all kind of hoping for. Lean into a little bit more of the lore side of things and kind of add or invent a little bit more story to it.
Mm-hmm.
That could lead into it becoming a little bit of a longer experience because there's more content to enjoy and there's a reason to play those games because they added stuff to it. And also they could tie in a little bit of Kanto into it as well, because there's a lot of story that I think Pikachu and Eevee hints at that we don't necessarily see. So it could tie up loose ends in that way as well.
Mm-hmm. Maybe give us, like you said, the history of why red, green, and blue are the way they are. If we do go back to Kanto,
Right. Yeah, well, why are we seeing them as mythical figures if they didn't actually do anything?
Yeah.
Because you played as a completely different character.
Because I remember them... This is bad research on my end, because I haven't played the game that much since it came out, obviously. But I just kind of remember them saying that, oh yeah, we completed our gym challenge years ago.
Right.
And I think they're not champions, because Lance is a champion. But not even Lance was
not current champions, at least.
That's you.
Because there's a lot of implications, or at least history or implied history, that Green had something to do with Mewtwo and the Pokemon Manor on Cinnabar Island. But it's like the game hints at a lot of things, but never follows through with it. It leaves things frustratingly open-ended. Like, what did happen? What's the history there? Why doesn't she know what a human is? Like, that humans aren't Pokemon, Like, why don't they just show us? Why do we have to do this headcanon or this, like, theory crafting type stuff? Where they could go a little bit more into it, some of the history angle of it, maybe Celebi is somehow a part of that as well. Kind of showing what happened on Cinnabar Island and see, what did Red and Blue accomplish? Aside from them being champions, I guess, what makes them more legendary than someone like Lance, for example? Lance is just someone that you, like, fight once, but then they hold Red and Blue in such a high regard. What makes them, in this world at least, like, such revered characters? There probably was some story there that we're missing.
Now that we've recovered and had ourselves a little chat, what did you think?
Leave us a comment on YouTube and like the episode.
That really helps us out.
We're also on Twitter and Instagram at the Low HP Podcast, if you want to reach out there.
And subscribe if you want to catch more of us on YouTube.
We're also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Links in the show notes, as always.